Hello everyone, my name is Hanna Komar. I am a Belarusian writer, poet, translator and activist, and I currently live in London in exile. In my doctoral research, I explore connections between domestic abuse and state violence in Belarus using feminist, familial, poetic autoethnography. I use personal experience of violence lived in my home, in our family, and the violence committed by the Belarusian state, a dictatorial regime, to show that domestic violence is a systemic issue and rather than a private problem. And a big focus of my work is on mother and daughter relationships and how they are shaped by patriarchy and affected further by domestic violence. My method is poetic, feminist, familial autoethnography, as I said, and it values personal and vulnerable stories and explores the multiplicity of women's experiences and layers of silence. It places ethics of care above efficiency as the outcome of academic work and is reflective of the challenges of writing about traumatic experiences involving close relationships and writing from exile. My ethics chapter is rather long and detailed, for this is an emotionally challenging research, written about family in exile, from exile. So here are the questions I'm going to cover in this presentation. Obviously, these are not all, and I'm not going to provide a lot of details, but we'll briefly cover each of them. The first one is what's patriarchy's influence on mother-daughter relationships? Public discourse in post-Soviet countries portrays a mother figure as responsible for all the troubles a child faces in life and for all the problems in society, very often. Adrian Rich reminds us that motherhood is a patriarchal institution where female experience is shaped by male expectations and structures. And Marilyn Mehta writes about how we are conditioned to wish for a perfect mother, a perfect in our opinion, right? And I was also trapped in this, expecting my mother to always do the right thing from my point of view, to never project her fears or insecurities on her daughters, always support us, always be wise, and most importantly, she should have never allowed domestic violence to happen to us. So this awareness of expectations from my mother is the foundation of the way that I actually write about her in my study. The question 2 is, how does domestic violence affect mother-daughter relationships? Well, abusers often use a combination of patterned verbal and physical behaviors that manipulate mother and her children into alienation. It's called a web of entrapment by Morris. It involves manipulation, coercion, threats, and physical violence, which leave mother and the children disempowered and confused, and it creates barriers for a healthy relationship between mother and the children and the kind of like the rest of the world, the outside world. Moreover, the perpetrator shifts the responsibility very often for violence from himself onto the mother and creates an image of himself as a victim. And words are often used as tools to maintain power by the perpetrator and impose his reality on the mother and children. What's an ethical way then to write about familial experiences? I involve my mother and sister into my research. I record conversations with them and I include their stories, the experiences of violence in my research, both in the critical element of it and in the poetic, practice-based element. And for that, I made sure that I obtained the informed consent, which is a very detailed. And also, it's a good idea to give oneself some time between finishing the research or writing the family story and publicizing it, because our views might have changed. I do that by finishing the writing the draft, the first draft, quite early, and then having a lot of time for editing and reflection. Sharing our experiences in a reflexive way is caregiving. Carolyn Ellis wrote that caregiving and receiving can create strong bonds between mother and children. Because I live in exile away from my family, when them being willing to share their experiences with me and me collecting them and including them with care and respect is the way for us to give and receive care. What is my place in my research then, and who has the power to decide what to write and how? Well, feminist approach to relational ethics ensures that non-dominance of research at any stage of the research. Reflexivity in this context means being as transparent as I can about conflicting feelings that I might have when writing about my family members, as well as making myself vulnerable, refusing to fault and blame others, and trying to consider how the represented others might view their representation. As part of this approach, I chose a conversation as a method of collecting my mom's and sister's stories. It is more organic for us as a family and is conscious of the positionality of me, the researcher. Because if I chose to interview my family members, I would have a narrative privilege over them, as I have a higher level of education, I have access to the resources allowing me to write this research. I am based in a safer environment, and I make decisions what to ask, how to interpret the answers, what to include into the narrative, and what to withhold. So a conversation just feels more appropriate, and it becomes really a space of genuine connection for us. So how do I story my mother's experiences without colonizing them? Marilyn Mehta asks this question in her work involving writing her mother's biography, and I come to the same conclusion as her. I try to write this story as a tribute to my mother and go about this research and writing process in ways that hold my mother with respect, honor, and integrity. I've made this attitude part of my communication with mom overall since I started this research, and I've integrated it into my the way I think about my mother. And I noticed that I've become actually kinder to her and even kinder to myself. And the last question I'm gonna consider here is, how can writing about mother ethically heal a wounded bond? I noticed that when I write about my mother, not just when I write about her, when I listen to her stories, I almost stop being her daughter. I become just an empathetic listener, and she is just a human being sharing the stories of her life. I see her for who she is. And as I told before earlier, words play a role in the perpetrators imposing his power and his reality on the mother and children. But words also play a crucial role in re-establishing mother and daughter relationship. So by making space for love, care, non-blaming, respect and empathy for my mother in my writing about our shared experiences of violence, I am using language to transform the damaging narrative into a healing story. Carolyn Ellis shares how writing her mother and listening to her allowed Ellis to see the qualities that she hadn't seen before in her mother. Quote, independence, organization, strength, appreciative spirit, sense of humor, pride, confidence, discipline. End of quote. So writing about her mother's life helped her to understand and express her feelings about her and made her more engaged in their relationship. And same has become true for me. Moreover, when women story themselves in relation to their family members, mothers in particular, we, quote, redefine womanhood and personhood for our contemporaries. Turn Un E emphasizes the importance of writing feminist stories for building intergenerational feminist connections. The work of writing about our mothers is the work of writing about other mothers, and by doing it, we are doing it for others' daughters too. It connects her theory to Hirsch, who emphasizes that we cannot talk about women's oppression without studying intergenerational relations between women and the context in which they've developed, the emotional, political, economic, and symbolic structures of family and society. Hirsch suggests that as part of it, we must see through the experiences of sexism inherited from our mothers and reinterpret our mothers' lives for ourselves to see that they too have struggled for some peace, beauty, and respect for themselves as women. And on this touching note, let me make this touching note, leave it instead of a conclusion, and I'll just share the literature that I used in preparation for this presentation. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to discussing it in more detail.